जुम्मा 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 8 दिन और आज पीर के दिन. How apt. We have a very special guest on this teeny tiny show जो कि hopefully इसका stature, वकार और hype सारा बढ़ा के रख देगा, उड़ा के रख देगा. We have the great Atiya Khan.
Assalamualaikum.
पीर साहब, thank you. आप आए. The idea to ask you on to Jummah Jummah 8 दिन was for me personally as an artist, as an expressionist, to really start having conversations and discourses that just go beyond mere entertainment, comedy, or any one-dimensional form of performance. The idea is to spread conversations out towards other interesting and creative people, and I had no one else in mind but to start it off with. So thank you again. ये हो गई अच्छी वाली बातें. अब ज़रा आते हैं सवाल जवाब की तरफ. मॉडल, फैशन डिज़ाइनर, एक्टर, फिल्म मेकर, एंड नाउ एन एंटरप्रेन्योर, एंड अबव ऑल सूफी टीचर.
Well, I wouldn't call myself a Sufi teacher. I have a Sufi teacher, but yeah, on the path trying to be.
मैं कौन सा और हमारी ऑडियंस कौन सी वाली आपकी साइड को फॉलो करे? डू यू इवन डू ऑल दीज साइड्स ऑफ यू कोलेट हार्मोनियसली? इज देयर अ लीडिंग साइड टू इट जो कि बाकी सारी आइडेंटिटीज को, एवतार्स को लीड करती है?
So I think there's an issue in people's minds that we put ourselves in a box.
Okay.
जी मैं religious हूँ तो मेरा एक किस्म का लिबास होगा और मेरा एक माइंडसेट होगा और मैं एक तरह का एक कैरेक्टर अपना कैरेक्टर बना दूँगा. सेम विद अदर आइडेंटिटीज़ दैट वी टेक अपॉन आवरसेल्व्स. जब वो हम अपने ऊपर एक आइडेंटिटी लेते हैं तो हम उसके जो पूरे ट्रैपिंग्स हैं वो लेके चल रहे होते हैं. फॉर मी वी आर मल्टी डायमेंशनल बीइंग्स. वी आर नॉट रिस्ट्रिक्टेड टू एनी वन बॉक्स एंड I think we all have many different facets, and it's all part of being a universal being.
देखिए, ये तो अब आपने भारी बातें करना शुरू कर दी. मैं तो आसान सवाल सोच रहा था. But at the same time, this idea of this universal being, obviously when you start off, let's go back to your roots when you started off as a model. How did it happen? How did the journey start as an artist?
So this was during the 80s और उस वक्त एक तो models बहुत कम थी. I was also working in an advertising agency और वो models का रोना हमेशा होता था. So there were a few clients who said कि please why don't you do a test shoot for us? You know, because अभी model नहीं मिल रही है. So anyway, I did a test shoot and they loved the results. And then there was this whole process of trying to convince me to model. That was not ever my interest, but वो मजबूरी के तौर पे you know modeling started, and then my friends who were designers and photographers and you know all of those.
मजबूरी एजेंसी वालों की या आपकी मजबूरी में कौन था?
मतलब in the sense that if you wanted a good end product and you don't have the right model for it, तो फिर वो आपका end product affect हो रहा होता है ना. So it was in the sort of to benefit the overall kind of end result that I said okay, if required I can also be in front of the camera for a time being.
ठीक है. और उस time being के बाद कुछ और प्लान था या वो भी फिर आपने कहा कि चलो एक दफ़ा ये शुरू होता है तो फिर देखेंगे कि क्या करना है?
I didn't expect it to kind of explode the way it did, but I suppose when you go back to that time, बहुत कम publications थी, एक channel था, तो अगर आप ज़रा visible हो जाते थे, तो overnight, you know, it became a big thing. Also because it was a slightly different kind of model from, you know, perhaps a different background and stuff like that. हमारी जो fashion models थी उस ज़माने में वो बहुत अच्छे sort of backgrounds वगैरह से थी, but जो हमारी commercial models थी, they were sort of.
कुछ अपने contemporaries के नाम लेती हैं, ज़रा name dropping करें थोड़ी सी, 2-3-4 बड़े नाम जो कि आपके टाइम पे उस वक्त you guys who started this movement, क्योंकि when you say the 80s, 80s doesn't go exactly with Pakistan's image कि उस ज़माने में पाकिस्तान में modeling, music, art was one of the most repressive times. I mean, I think model होने का मतलब है कि आधा फतवा तो आपके खिलाफ वैसे ही आ गया ना.
So I think that was one of the motivating factors for us because it was the time of Zia al-Haq and Islamization. And I think a lot of creative people wanted to use fashion and art and music as a way to push back against that kind of ideology that was being imposed and to still maintain some kind of a
Rebellion,
liberal, a liberal kind of image. And Zia al-Haq was quite intelligent in that way that he didn't really target the elite. मतलब वो हेरल्ड और न्यूज़ लाइन और उस किस्म की पब्लिकेशंस में फैशन शूट्स काफ़ी प्रोग्रेसिव किस्म के थे, वो उनको जाने देते थे. यू नो वो टेलीविजन पे था कि हाँ आप दुपट्टा पहने हैं, यू नो वो थोड़ा सा उसने ट्राई किया था. बट अगेन देयर वाज अ लॉट ऑफ पुश बैक इवन एट दैट टाइम.
मेरे बैठे बैठे एक जहन में ख्याल आया कि एग्जैक्टली ज़िया वाले टाइम में, इफ़ यू रिमेंबर, दिस इज़ अ टाइम पंजाबी सिनेमा सॉर्ट ऑफ एक्सप्लोडेड. और एग्जैक्टली विद दिस कंसिडरेशंस के वो जो एक सूडो मॉडेस्टी का एक पूरा डिज़ाइन था कि यार क्या पहना जाएगा क्या नहीं जाएगा. यू रिमेंबर कि हाउ इट वाज अ मैटर ऑफ पंजाबी फिल्म्स वेयर ऑल दीज एक्ट्रेसेस वर ड्रेस्ड अप इन फुल क्लोथ्स बट येट दे वुड लीव नथिंग टू द इमेजिनेशन. इट वाज सो यू नो टॉपसी टर्वी ऑफ हाउ दे वर एक्सप्रेसिंग देमसेल्व्स. विच ब्रिंग्स मी टू, आपको कभी उन घटिया दायरों से ऑफर्स नहीं आई कि अब तो आप हर जगह टीवी पे आगे आए, फिल्में भी करना शुरू कर दें?
नहीं.
Short answer, but नहीं कभी किसी से आके कहा होगा कि और ये.
Yes, but okay. I mean the film industry was
then you get डांट पड़ जाएगी इनसे.
Was a different ball game.
I think वो वाला crowd भी इधर concentrated था in Lahore. You were in Karachi. Can you like describe the differences of the scenes of the two, you know, major cultural markets of Pakistan? कि जब आप वहाँ करियर स्टार्ट करी थी तो लाहौर में क्या वाइब होती थी whenever you would
like you said, Lahore was more Lollywood and Karachi was more advertising, television, fashion kind of scene.
Theatre का क्या scene था उनका?
Theatre was very progressive. I think in Lahore as well. Theatre उस ज़माने में काफ़ी you know vibrant था. And I think उस ज़माने में sometimes what happens is that जब restrictions ज़्यादा होती है ना तो बंदा और भी creatively उन चीज़ों को bypass करने की कोशिश करता है. So a lot of creative work came out during the 80s.
Kind of like it did in Iran.
Yeah.
Like with their revolution, in fact, उनके वाले तो अभी भी हमसे भी ज़्यादा stringent rules हैं. But just look at the work that comes out of there. It goes to all across Europe. But at the same time, I mean, is the push always towards trying to get these regulations right? यानी हर वक्त वो लड़ाई करनी पड़ती है कि हाँ यार अच्छा जो रोका जा रहा है इस चीज़ को, उस लिमिट को पुश किया जाए, किसी तरीके से ढूंढा जाए. Does it have to be that way?
Because artists are basically people who are thinkers, who are sort of wanting to push the envelope, or have a voice, want to express themselves. इसीलिए आप इस field में आए ना, because you have something different to say. So automatically, it puts you, you know, in the position of an observer of the world around you and the shortcomings of, you know, of what you see.
उस ज़माने में आप जो would it be fair to say कि modeling में you and some of your contemporaries were like, they were the faces of that particular aspect of the media revolution or the entertainment counterculture? उस ज़माने में जो musicians और filmmakers थे, आपके दायरे में कौन लोग थे? Just paint me a picture कि you know what was it like to spend a day with Atiya in 1989, let's say, जब ज़िया-उल हक चला गया और उस वक्त आप लोग अपने काम वाम के.
I mean, there was all, you know, there was Tariq and, you know, Rizwan Beg and Ruha Ghaznavi and, you know, so the photographer, Arif Mahmood, Tappu Javeri, they were all sort of starting out. You know, there was Vital Signs and, you know, Junoon was going to start a little, I think, later. But wo you know, Imran Aslam with his sort of kind of work that he was sort of doing in theatre and other, बड़े बहुत ही, you know, interesting sort of लोग थे.
And what was the most, चलें देखें, एक तो ये कि which was your most famous crossover campaign which really like जिसके बाद आपको भी देखे हो I've made it क्योंकि अब जैसे इंटरनेट वाला जो फीडबैक जैसे आज है let's say you upload something that goes viral and all it's a matter of a day कि यार हम हो गए पहुंच गए
नहीं, but in उस ज़माने में तो because I was doing commercial modeling which meant that there I was on television, I was on billboards, I was on magazines, so it was just an overnight sort of a thing.
फीडबैक कैसे मिलता था? It would be a matter of waiting out days, going to कोई घर आ गया दावत होगी तो you would know कि कोई आके this is Atiya Khan, what was it like? I mean जैसे आजकल तो Facebook है ना, I mean of course someone sees you, they look for you online and they try to reach out.
No, that's basically if you go somewhere and then people recognize you, with especially if you go out in public.
और
so
उस जमाने में obviously TikTok वगैरह तो नहीं बनाने को कहता था, तो that must be less annoying than now.
No, but you were on television. There was one channel. If you were on, in 2-3 ads, then everybody was watching only you every day. So, magazines भी 2-4 ही थी. So it was not so spread out as it is now. It was very concentrated. जो भी चीज होती थी वो फिर nationwide एक
और फिर हर समझ रहा हूँ आपकी बात. आर्मी वालों के साथ काम किया उस दौरान कभी?
No.
वो लोग क्या काम कर रहे थे उस दौरान उन्होंने ड्रामे वगैरह नहीं बनाना शुरू किए थे?
I think एक आध शायद किए होंगे.
ठीक हो गया. एक अब where does this journey of Atiya Khan go from here? एक तो ये कि आज के टाइम में now again you're doing so many things, you're running this sort of countercultural movement as well through your documentary work, and then you have a brand that you're establishing and it's taking it internationally, you're traveling all over. What's next? What's the next big thing we should be waiting for?
I don't operate like that. I operate very much in the moment.
Okay.
And whatever guidance and signs and whatever direction I feel in the moment I should be sort of going towards is where I go, because I feel that planning and the bigger picture and the bigger, is not really accessible to us.
To us, bole to?
Matlab to human beings. There's a divine plan, there's a greater sort of plan which is much better than what we can sort of plan for ourselves. And if you can just be in a state of flow and surrender, then whatever needs to happen, तो उसमें आप resistance नहीं कर रहे होते हैं, you're able to just go with it.
गैर हतमी करारदाद नाम का इवेंट होने वाला है 8, 9 और 10 मार्च को. कोई सेहूनी ये हूनी बेरूनी साजिश नहीं, तमाम म्यूजिक और कॉमेडी टैलेंट लोकल है. 1500 की टिकट है, टिकट वाला पर पहुंचो, इससे पहले बिक जाएं और तुम पछताओ हमारे दुश्मनों की तरह. पाक फौज जिंदाबाद, गज़वाए हिंद पाइंदाबाद.
आपने अभी सरेंडर की जब बात की, what is the difference between a sect and a silsila?
So first of all, surrender is a concept, is a Sufi concept, right? So it's one of the basic Sufi concepts कि आप अल्लाह पे छोड़ें, बेहतरी उसी में है कि you kind of remain in a state of surrender. So Sufism is not a mazhab, right? It's not कि भाई आप शिया हैं या सुन्नी हैं या सेक्ट हैं. Any sect can be part of a Sufi silsila. So the mazhabs are part of institutionalized religion. Sufism is the spiritual side of religion. So,
सेक्ट मजहब में आते हैं और सूफीज़म आता है जो दूसरी साइड आप कह रही हैं, which is?
So it's the esoteric, the spiritual, the understanding of the message as it relates to your personal inner journey.
आपका सिलसिला कौन सा है और आपका सेक्ट कौन सा है? मुश्किल सवाल.
Sects, so I don't really believe in.
ठीक है.
So I think I have both influences. My mother's family is Sayyid, so us tarah se we weren't Shia, but we got a lot of that kind of knowledge. And my father's family is hardcore Sunni, so वो दोनों चीज़ें. I was brought up with both kind of sides of the picture. As far as the silsila is concerned, I am bet with Sheikh Nazim, who is part of the Naqshbandi silsila.
Sheikh Nazim Haqqani.
Sheikh Nazim al-Haqqani.
Cyprus. Right.
Yeah. And he is part of the Naqshbandi silsila, but I'm also very closely affiliated with the Qalandri silsila.
और कलंदरी सिलसिला किन टीचर का है या उसमें टीचर्स डिफाइन नहीं है?
So there are two types of Sufi systems. All of the Sufi systems except for the Qalandri system are part of the Qutub system, and which is a teaching system. जिसके भी उसमें भी एक टीचर होता है, मुर्शिद होता है, उसके मुरीद होते हैं, they go through a whole process. The Qalandar, and every era has one Qutub, and parallel to the Qutub is the Qalandar. But the Qalandar is not a teaching system, it's not a teacher, they are the teaching made flesh. So they're kind of Christ consciousness keh do, ya Ali consciousness keh do. And the malangs or the faqirs of the Qalandri silsila, they have fraternities, they have a code, but their teaching system is different, their teaching is different. It's more about a direct connection with God, and their idea of Sharia is different. So I would say that these are the polar opposites. Jo Naqshbandi silsila hai, and Naqshbandis are the only so-called Sunni silsila because they take their lineage back to Hazrat Abu Bakr. The rest of the silsilas go towards Hazrat Ali. And the Qalandars are very closely affiliated with Hazrat Ali. So, they're the two extreme, radical, opposite sides of the spectrum.
But that spectrum, if I'm hearing it correctly, वो सारे का सारा spectrum Islam का ही spectrum है जिसकी हम बात कर रहे हैं, right?
Islam and the spiritual side of Islam, meaning the Sufi side of Islam.
Does this spiritual side also encompass all that comes before it harmoniously? I'll try to frame this question in this way. Growing up in Saudi Arabia, I always grew up with this impression कि जो लोग हमसे पहले जिन किताबों में या मज़ाहिब में मानते हैं वो हमसे अलग हैं और जो उसके बाद की चीज़ों में मानते हैं वो भी अलग हैं. There was never really an integration sort of a strategy. Like Ibn Insha मजाक करते थे कि इस्लाम का दायरा जो है वो छोटा होता जा रहा है, बढ़ नहीं रहा, उसमें से लोग निकाले जा रहे हैं. So I grew up in that kind of environment. So is Sufism an answer to that? Is it like a way to integrate all these people, to bring them closer?
So not just in Islam, but every religion has two sides. There's the institutionalized side of the religion, which has the churches and the temples and the priests and the clergy. And that has traditionally been hijacked by vested interests, money, power, divide and rule, fear-based religion. That's institutionalized religion. But each faith tradition also has a spiritual side. So like the Muslims have the Sufi tradition, the Christians have the Gnostic tradition, the Jews have the Kabbalah, right. The Hindus have the yogis. So वो जो है two sides of every religion है, right? The institutional side of every religion is kind of the same. They kind of say the same thing. We're better. We know everything. Everybody else is wrong. Kind of a thing. Fear-based. कि ये करोगे तो जहन्नम में जाओगे, वो करोगे तो जहन्नम में. And the spiritual side of all these religions are also similarly have a very core similar concept, which is universality of the message, brotherhood of mankind, peace, harmony, love, that side of it.
Do you think in this day and age, a complete bend towards either of the sides kind of messes the balance up? I mean, maybe a Qalandar also needs to understand the institutionalization, and the institutionalized, the people, the clergy, they also need to understand the Qalandars.
So the Qalandars, because are very, very radical, I feel that that role was played by the Naqshbandi Silsila because they became a bridge. The Naqshbandi Silsila, was Sunni, which was more acceptable, Abu Bakr. The other thing was that they kept the Sharia very, very, very prominent. And they were the tariqat that traditionally and till today are very active in mainstream politics and mainstream religion. So they kind of became a bridge between mainstream religion, clergy, institutionalized religion, and the more radical Sufi tariqats and their thought processes.
आप अगर in your capacity in what you believe in, would it be fair to say कि apart from शेख नाजिम की आप जो उनका इल्म है उस पे आप चलती हैं, लेकिन जो कलंदरी कोड है वो आप लाल शहबाज का फॉलो करती हैं, hence the visage. What's your relationship with Lal Shahbaz Qalandar?
So it was interesting because it was Sheikh Nazim who actually directed me to Lal Shahbaz Qalandar. But जो लाल शहबाज कलंदर की जो एनर्जी है वो एक बहुत overpowering किस्म की एनर्जी है. So it's not just me, but anybody who goes there is affected, and certain sort of changes start kind of happening because that energy kind of takes over. So even in my case, after returning for the first time I went and filmed the Urs, something took over. A lot of changes started happening. A lot of shifts started happening. Certain memories that I didn't even know existed. I don't even know what they were, past life, whatever. वो एक पूरा एक different universe जो है वो आपका खुलता है.
I can attest to that. क्योंकि मेरी आपसे जो जर्नी जाके जुड़ी है, and I've been able to observe and work with you for these past 3-4 years, and I'm being real actually. मुझे अभी एकदम से वो overwhelming feeling इसलिए आई क्योंकि it exactly did the same, like you said, for me, coming from Saudi Arabia, from this very rigid Wahhabi upbringing, to go to Lal Shahbaz Qalandar and attest कि हाँ मेरे अंदर वो चीज़ धड़क रही है. I can feel it. I felt after quite a long while, after a gap actually, कि I feel my connection to God again. अब मुसीबत ये कि ये वाली बातें मैं अपने दोस्तों को कहूँगा जो उस ज़माने के हैं, तो वो बिल्कुल भी इस चीज़ पे ना समझ पाएंगे ना. And I think that is the disconnect, but I understand what you're saying. I mean, I came back from it realizing that is what true Aqidat looks like. You can't discard the energy that is in that place. बाकी हर जगह जो मसला चल रहा है वो everything needs to be objectively corrected, but लाल शहबाज कलंदर के बारे में थोड़ा और इस मूवमेंट पे, I mean, I'm really fascinated. Can you just like my audience, lead me in to the history briefly, a brief picture of him or a brief portrait of him?
So there are 3 Qalandars. The first Qalandar was Rabia Basri in the 9th century, and she is really the one who set the mold of a different kind of spirituality which was based in divine love. Then later on, Lal Shahbaz Qalandar carried that philosophy forward, and it's basically immersion in God. It's being in this state of total connection with God to the exclusion of everything else. So everything else you shed because you need to be free to be able to follow inspiration and guidance and, be in this state of masti, as they call it.
अब हम बात करेंगे ज़रा धमाल और मस्ती पे. एक जो ये लाइटर नक्शबंदी वाला हक 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 सीन है और फिर वो जो वाइल्ड 7 वाला हक 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 सीन है, हाउ डज वन गो फ्रॉम देयर टू देयर? क्योंकि मैंने आपके साथ दोनों चीज़ें विजिट की हैं. आई हैव सीन यू बी एट पीस विद बोथ ऑफ देम. इज इट समथिंग दैट वी ऑल नीड टू अट्यून आवरसेल्फ टू? क्योंकि आपको पता है ना कि समटाइम्स द पीपल हु लेट्स से प्रेफरेबली गो टू द मॉस्क 5 times a day, वो बहुत आराम से डिस्कार्ड करने को तैयार हो जाएंगे कि यार वो वाली चीज़ तो हमें समझने की ज़रूरत ही नहीं है. And then there are those who get so much must or so much involved or महव into that other side कि वो फिर इस वाली को करते हैं. तो Or maybe one needs to go there and feel it. I think you need. Is that the case?
So there too, you've mentioned the Naqshbandi zikr, and then you've mentioned the dhamal at 7,
Bilkul.
right? So as far as the zikr is concerned, तो वो कुरान में भी जो आयत है कि सलाह से ज़्यादा zikr, the thing that is higher than salah is zikr. What does zikr mean? Zikr basically means remembrance. ठीक है, तो एक कॉन्सेप्ट ये है कि भाई आप उठते बैठते साइड पे अल्लाह को याद करें, अपने कॉन्वर्सेशंस में अल्लाह को रखें, you know, be aware of God, remember God continuously. And then we have the Sufi zikr, which is sort of chanting certain verses from the Quran and the names of God and so forth. अब उसका ये भी एक कॉन्सेप्ट है कि वो जो आप एक समा क्रिएट करते हैं, वो जो आप एक महफिल क्रिएट करते हैं, उसका भी पर्पस ये है कि वो आपको रिमेम्बरेंस की तरफ लेके जाएगी. बट इट्स अ वेरी स्पेसिफिक रिमेम्बरेंस. इट्स द रिमेम्बरेंस ऑफ द डे ऑफ कवनेंट. So the day of covenant is before we were born into this world. God on the अरफात पे कहते हैं कि वो सारी जो सोल्स आनी थी उनको सबको असेंबल किया अल्लाह ने और उनसे एक वादा लिया कि जब आप दुनिया में जाएंगे, so you will not forget me and you will not forget your purpose and mission of coming to earth.
ठीक है.
Right? So the zikr and is sort of a kind of meditative state that over a period of time starts opening the remembrance of that day. So when you remember that day, you remember God, you remember your purpose here, you remember the promise you made to God, and you start awakening. अब जहाँ तक धमाल का ताल्लुक है, you know, from the outside it looks कि भी वहाँ लोग नाच रहे गा रहे हैं. ठीक है, धमाल means नाचो. But again, the meaning behind it is very different. The dhamal is not a dance. The dhamal is actually a form of matam. And the movements are meant to basically enact the journey of Hazrat Zainul Abidin and Bibi Zainab when after Karbala they were paraded, you know, through the deserts, and from Karbala they had to walk as prisoners of war to Syria, where they were presented at the court of Muawiyah. तो वो जो उनकी गरम रेत मिट्टी पे जो पाँव हैं लगते हैं, तो वो ऊपर नीचे जो पाँव होते हैं वो है.
बिल्कुल.
जो वो हेड मूवमेंट है, जो बाल जो हिला रहे होते हैं, that's supposed to be the moment when Bibi Zainab's scarf was snatched from her head. So these are all the movements are very symbolic of that
interpretive,
of that journey.
Can I narrate my impressions of it? Because I distinctly remember how I went into the whole trance of it, if that's the correct word. And I've never felt it before or since. I mean, that's something that I've spoken with a lot of friends. Wink wink, बहुत सारे और भी तरीके हैं अपनी states को alter करने के, but the way I achieved that state, that 1 second where I felt a timelessness and placelessness, it was something else. I went there, मुझे आज भी याद है कि, and it's been documented in your work and even our dear friend David, hello Papa, his work, that we go in, हम अंदर जाते हैं, and at that time I was shooting, तो shoot करके कुछ shots लिए, and at one point I was, you know, kind of mimicking the whole movement of the crowd. हालांकि कैमरा था. फिर आपने at some point मेरे पे रहम किया, आपने कहा कैमरा इधर दो मुझे, and you took it over. फिर जो मैंने धमाल किया है, जो साथ जो वहाँ पे धमाल कर रहा था लीड, उसकी तरह का किया. He kind of just, and the amazing part was कि वो अपना सर यूं यूं घुमा रहा है. It's like at light speed, और वो मुझे उस पे बता रहा है कि ऐसे ऐसे. He like corrected me कि यूं 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 नहीं, यूं. And then I did that thing for like about आधा मिनट, 1 मिनट. मुझे गश आया. I fell backward. The crowd put me back. It's amazing. I cried afterwards. I, you know, embraced everyone around. I felt a part of something bigger than me. And that stuck with me. I mean, I can understand why that is so cathartic, that is so therapeutic. लेकिन टफ क्वेश्चन ये है कि क्या उसकी आड़ में विद द यंगर मोर impressionable audiences, are they kind of being led into, you know, areas where they don't understand it completely? Are they exposed to it like, oh, chalo Abdullah Shah Ghazi ke mazar chalo, wahan chalo, yahan chalo, chill karo, smoke up karo, ghus jao? Yani, do you worry that meaning is kind of getting...
देखो, ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन हैपन्स ऑन मल्टीपल लेवल्स. ठीक है, एक आपका मेंटल अंडरस्टैंडिंग होती है. ठीक है, उसमें है कि भी अगर आपको शौक़ है तो आप रिसर्च करेंगे, आप समझेंगे, आप लोगों से बात करेंगे. ठीक है, और एक एनर्जेटिक जो है वो ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन होती है. सो आई फील दैट just in going to these places, being in the presence of those saints, imbibing their energy is also transformative. Whether whatever आपके concepts हो, आपको समझ आ रहा हो, नहीं आ रहा हो, mentally आपको नहीं समझ आ रहा हो, but आपको soul level पे या किसी different feeling level पे कुछ ना कुछ transformation आपकी हो रही होती है.
Another interesting thing about Sehwan Sharif and the shrine of Lal Shahbaz Qalandar is how effortlessly and it seems before, I mean, अब तो क्योंकि partition के बाद उस तरह you don't get to see a lot of Hindu pilgrims over there, but I've heard from you and read about it कि उससे पहले तक it was one of the most inclusive shrines के जो कि यानी इन दो बड़े cultures में जो कि आपस में इतनी सदियों से साथ रह रहे हैं, they both believed in him.
So a lot of the Sufi saints have followers from various faith traditions. इंडिया में भी है, यहाँ भी है. लाल शहबाज में जो खासियत ये है कि it's not just the followers but also the caretakers that were Hindu. जैसे बोदला बहार was a Hindu, then Lal Kovar's family was Hindu, and even today the people representing those traditions are still Hindu, and they've never converted, they've never been told to convert, and there doesn't seem to be any conflict. You know, it's understood कि भाई अकीदा है तो अकीदा है.
हाँ, बता रही थी कि the caretakers of Lal Shahbaz Qalandar, the shrine and the saint, जो अभी भी हैं, they're still Hindu families?
Yes. I mean, there are various ones. There's Muslims also, but there's also Hindus.
Did we meet any of them? Are the Malangs, some of them, were they Hindus?
No, not those Malangs that we met. There's a specific tradition, वो मेहंदी लेके आते हैं उसमें.
Right, and otherwise they live, this is their livelihood, यानी वो वहाँ पे फिर जो भी यानी उसका निज़ाम है,
हर एक के अपने रूल, अपने ड्यूटीज होती हैं basically.
मलंग्स पे बात करते हैं, which is I think one of the most enigmatic aspect of the shrine, and again it's something I've conversed with them. At one point you feel like कि दुनिया में इनसे ज़्यादा यूनिवर्स के साथ attuned कोई नहीं है, and at others you obviously feel कि you know they don't make any sense. How do you define that aura? What do you how can you define a malang? Is there a definition of it? Is it something that you have to interact with to understand? तभी समझ आएगा, यानी दूर से बैठ के उसको डिफाइन करने का फ़ायदा नहीं है. मामा जी को अगर एज एन एग्जांपल लें, उनके साथ फिर जो उनके और डिसाइपल्स थे जिनके साथ हम बैठे और शेर व शायरी.
So there's certain criteria in terms of joining the fraternity. वो एक तो ये है कि भाई आप अपना घर बार छोड़ के आप इस fraternity को join कर रहे हैं. So you are not allowed to have any connections with anything worldly. कि आप बिल्कुल आज़ाद हैं. So that is one of the criterias. But they follow what is called the Malamati tradition.
Malamat के लफ्ज़ से, which means malamat.
Self-blame.
Okay.
So it means कि आप जो है अपनी ईगो को हमेशा करेक्ट करते रहते हैं. तो आप कभी भी इस तरह से अपने आप को नहीं प्रेजेंट करेंगे कि आप holier than thou वाला एटीट्यूड दे रहे हैं या allowing other people to start seeing you as holier than thou. So if you feel that your ego is getting a bit boosted और आपको बहुत ज़्यादा spiritual समझा जा रहा है or whatever, then you will do something or behave in a certain way that brings some kind of criticism or some kind of
towards
doubt
you.
in people's mind,
Okay.
to again bring it down to and
It is a construct. मैं समझ रहा हूँ कि it is a very proper construct that you do it with a purpose. I mean, it is a. I don't want to call it a trick. Is it a fair word? But it is a kind of a trick, right? Okay, that they kind of, play it to you. Okay, उन्हें पता भी है कि their spirit is higher, but they won't let you in.
But it's also trying to control their own ego as well, ना कि मेरी ego ना अपने आप को कुछ ज़्यादा समझने लगे, मैं अपने आप को कैसे grounded रखूँ? Because a lot of times when people start venerating you or आपको एक pedestal पे ले आते हैं तो फिर आपकी ego out of control होने लग जाती है ना, तो how do you keep yourself grounded?
By dismissing the person. जैसे मामा जी की बात याद है कि जब उन्हें को बहुत ज़्यादा तंग कर रहा होता ना कि मुर्शद तो चले तो जाए तो जब यानी he would actively
गाली भी दे देते हैं
हाँ मैं काफ़ी सारी देते हैं और वो 2-3 ज़ुबानों में देते हैं one of the and I would like to bring this on record क्योंकि I've told the story to all my friends. I had an interaction that when we met Mama Ji, obviously you introduced us to him, then he gave us gifts, he tied dhagas around our wrists, फिर उसने मैं डेविड आप there were other friends as well बैठे और लोग भी आना शुरू हो गए, अब चाय चल रही है and थोड़ी देर में there's a small tape recorder he brings out and we all start doing a miniature dhamal because the big dhamal was the next day. तो वो he kind of preps us for it and the next night when I meet him again and by this time मामा जी ने 2-3 चीज़ें मेरे बारे में guess कर ली हुई हैं. I don't know how. लॉरी है किधरों है he guesses where I'm from. अच्छा माँ प्यो कितने दिन हैं and now he's going into my backstory. I told him कि मेरे अम्मा बशदरे से हैं and he's like अच्छा थे ते सारे हराम दिन हैं and he's joking with me, he's letting me know कि मैं जानता हूँ कि अच्छा तू किस सब कल्चर से और क्या आ रहा है, कौन लोग कहाँ तेज हैं. So there is that deeper knowledge he has, but on the surface अगर मैं उन्हें ये कहता कि अच्छा यार अभी let's do some functional task, so that's not going to be his thing. He's going to push me away. Or maybe another thing, if they have made up their mind, you can't change it, right? I've heard कि chief ministers, MNAs, MPAs डरते हैं इनसे. Have you? How do you explain that?
वो है ना कि मलंग का ना छेड़ने वाली जो बात
ना
है,
छेड़
वो तो,
मलंगन.
हाँ. So basically, the idea is that if you're able to silence your monkey mind, if you're able to be in a state of mental silence, then any information, any knowledge is accessible to you.
और इनका मामला ये है.
That is the idea, na? That's the whole Kalandri sort of. But वो तो खैर जैसे रसूलुल्लाह का भी, I mean, where did he get that knowledge from, right? And how do you receive that knowledge? So ज़्यादातर क्या हो रहा होता है कि हमारा दिमाग इतना busy होता है, हमारा internal chatter इतना ज़्यादा होता है कि there is no room to hear anything outside of our own inner chatter. So वो तो फिर all these other practices, चाहे वो नमाज हो या मुराक़बा हो या योगी जो करते हैं और सारा कुछ, वो मसला ही सारा है कि आप अपने जो मंकी माइंड है या इनर चैटर है उसको साइलेंस कैसे करते हैं. Once you're able to achieve that and once you're able to make that into a continuous state of being, you have access to all information, knowledge, clairvoyance, psychic abilities, all of those things.
मेरे पाकिस्तानियों, 8, 9 और 10 तारीख को इवेंट है. आपने घबराना नहीं है. यहाँ सब बातें गैर हतमी होंगी, कोई बात पक्की नहीं. मैं अंदर हूँ मगर आप तो नहीं. निकलें बाहर गैर हतमी करारदाद के लिए. शुक्रिया.
Welcome back. Eki, before we switch over to the real world, in a nutshell, जो कि बहुत मुश्किल काम है. I know it's decades of work and research and immersion that's brought you to whatever you've discovered and presented. But in a nutshell, please describe the divine feminine. और किसी ऐसे तरीके से जो बहुत ज़्यादा feathers और beards ruffle ना हो, बेचारे male egos hurt ना हो जाए.
So, I mean, when we look at the concept of God, even, okay, we have the two attributes of God, the two types of attributes of God, which correspond to the names of God. There's the Jamal and the Jalal. So even within the attributes of God, there is the balance between what we call the masculine and the feminine.
Right.
Now, when you actually go into the root words of, let's say, Rahma, Rahim, Rahman, the root word is womb. So these are also very feminine attributes of God. You know, God loves you more than, I don't know, however many, 70 mothers. And, you know, there are all these references to the feminine side of God, and there are all these references to the masculine side of God. And this is the yin yang, right? And that is in all creations, in human beings, and, you know, in atoms and everything.
Right.
The problem is that if that balance is goes out of balance, then it affects and creates corruption all around. Now, whether that's that balance within ourselves or in society or in religion, जब वो balance out होता है ना, तो हर चीज़ out हो जाती है. तो अब unfortunately जो religion है, उसमें से balance out हुआ हुआ है. ठीक है, so the male patriarchal side has been given a lot of prominence, and the feminine side, which is a very strong side in all faith traditions, you know, from what's in the scriptures to the examples of, अगर हम अपना वाला ले रहे हैं तो बीबी खतीजा and बीबी फातिमा and बीबी ज़ैनब. I mean, these are
remarkable women.
Women who have taken the religion forward, women who have stood up against institutionalized religion, you know, have fought the battle. So वो जो सारा narrative है, वो कहीं दबा के औरत को आप, you know, कम घर में बंद कर दो, या चादर में लपेट दो, या उसको चुप करा दो, या उस पे हावी हो जाओ, या you know, like all those concepts, and that affects the balance within, because in men also, men who are out of balance are destructive men, are violent men, are aggressive men, are sad men, are, you know, but men who have a good balance of the masculine and feminine within themselves, like Rasulullah. He was very much in touch with a very receptive, soft, gentle, loving, you know, side to him. He wasn't all sort of macho and war and jihad and, you know, all of that stuff. So, एक तो ये energies हैं, male or feminine, you know, and then it's, you know, so within each gender and all of that. So there is an aspect of the divine which is feminine, but unfortunately women are disconnected from connecting with that divine feminine side within them because of the construct of society. And so we're losing out on that contribution that can come from women who are equally empowered in religion and spirituality, you know, and the kind of shift that would bring into societies.
So would it be fair to say that the divine feminine philosophy revolves around us as humans, हम इंसान बहैसियत ये समझें कि हाँ उस की जो इंटरप्रिटेशन उसको जो वो कह रही है साइड, इट्स इक्वली इम्पॉर्टेंट टू यू नो गिव इट इट्स प्लेस. उनको वो आया लीडरशिप हो, उनकी एक्टिविज्म हो, जो भी उनकी फोरसाइट है रिगार्डिंग व्हाट शेप रिलीजन एंड सोसाइटी टेक्स, हमें उनकी बराबर सुननी चाहिए, क्योंकि अभी तो ये चल रहा है ना.
अच्छा, मैं कह रही हूँ ना कि एक तो जेंडर है कि भाई women's rights, right? So I'm not talking about something so specific.
Right.
Because I feel that there's, just as there is the divine masculine and feminine, so अगर हम divine masculine and feminine की तरफ जा रहे हैं तो हम बहुत balanced लोग हैं, ठीक है? Then there is the toxic masculine and feminine.
बिल्कुल
The
बिल्कुल.
narcissist masculine and feminine.
Should we take names?
No, we don't have to take names. But वो spectrum भी है. So it's not that all women are divine and, you know, and all men are negative or divine or whatever.
Right.
These are energies that we have to sort of find that balance within ourselves.
And delineate accordingly. कि यानी इन चीज़ों का इदराक होना कि टॉक्सिसिटी कहाँ शुरू होती है और डिविनिटी कहाँ किस तरफ जा रही है. Not to confuse the two, right? जो हमारा मसला है कि the fact that the way societally Muslim countries in general or the developing countries more often than not, मर्दों का ये वाला stranglehold on the affairs of women, on how they should be allowed in society to grow, to move, to make decisions, और हजार चीज़ें ना फजूल बातें बताई हुई कि अच्छा जी उसे मार के चुप करा दो, उसे डिसिप्लिन ऐसे करो. And we spoke about this the other day as well, कि find one example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, someone saying कि यार ऐसा उन्होंने किया था, but yet you promote such a harsh version of masculinity constantly from the pulpit कि नहीं जी ऐसा कर लो, बिठा के बहुत सारे impressionable लड़के बिठाए हुए अजीब अजीब बातें की जा रही हैं. सुना है ऐसा हो रहा है.
So that's the whole question कि भाई हमने follow करना है रसूल अल्लाह के example. ठीक है, अल्लाह ने कहा है कि भाई जो मैसेंजर है उसका रास्ता आप अपनाओ. ठीक है, उनका रास्ता तो हम नहीं अपना रहे. ठीक है, मतलब कितने आदमी हैं जो अपने कपड़े खुद धोएंगे और अपनी right okay so they are
सीएंगे खुद, जानवरों को खुद दूध धोएंगे, बिल्कुल,
and don't expect that from their wives, and the kind of relationship that he had with women, and then of course his relationship with Bibi Khatija, who was much older, who was his employer,
more successful, more richer,
who was his support and
patron,
all of patron and all of those things. Then his relationship with his daughter, who he calls Umme Abiha, who he invites to finish his sermons, who he says was, conceived during the Miraj, who, matlab the list goes on and on and on of the rutba of the feminine that he is presenting to us, and the example of how you are supposed to honor that, So, and even in the difficult situation, even with women who were bickering and fighting and jealous, and the wives and that all that other drama that was going on. I mean, how gently and how lovingly,
how justly
you dealt with that. Even in the case of when you suspected one of your wives of having been unfaithful, how justly and how gently,
the story with Hazrat Aisha,
with the necklace story, how gently you dealt with that. You didn't go and beat her up or accuse her or dishonor her in any way. You separated yourself from her till you came to clarity.
Right.
So आप वो example तो नहीं follow कर रहे हैं. अब एक औरत आती है, आप पे कूड़ा फेंकती है, आप जब वो नहीं आती है तो आप मतलब उसकी खैरियत पूछने जाते हैं. So it's a completely different example of masculinity,
of how it should be, right? खैर हमें तो आजकल हमारे यहाँ पे जो sublime masculine है इस मुल्क में, वो कहते हैं कि अगर भूख लग रही है तो भूखे रहना सीखो, पेशेंट रहना ज़रूरी है. कह रहे हैं तो ठीक कह रहे हैं. एक आपको the way I've seen you conduct screenings and talks, how do you deal with the criticism कि जो एक लोगों की programming हुई हुई है कि अगर आप इस तरह without a hijab or without a certain construct of what a Islamic or a religious scholar or presenter should be like, इस criticism के साथ कैसे डील करती हैं? यानी इस वक्त कोई ना कोई यूथ क्लब के लोग बैठ के कह रहे होंगे यार हिजाब पहने बगैर बैठे देखो बातें कर रहे हैं, ये क्या हो रहा है?
तो मैंने हिजाब किया है.
ठीक है.
But I realized, वो एक born again syndrome होता है ना, जब आप हर चीज़ करना चाह रहे होते हैं. But the more I studied it, the more I realized कि ये कुरान में क्या है.
Alright.
ठीक है. And in the Quran, it's basically about covering your breasts, because at that time, women would cover their head, but they would have their breasts exposed.
Right.
Right. तो वो एक हया और एक covering, and it continuously it talks about not bringing attention to your organs.
Right.
बाल का concept नहीं है.
समझ रहा हूँ how it got. Okay, I hear you.
Right. So for me, and फिर वो वाला concept के क्या कहते हैं, एक particular word है कि औरत की वो क्या है, I'm forgetting the word. But what parts of a woman need to be covered?
Right.
Sharmgah. So then you go into different alims and scholars and religious of their time, और वो कहेंगे कि जी हाथ भी नहीं नजर आने चाहिए, यहाँ तक होना चाहिए, या एक बाल नजर आ गया तो फिर वो. But is that in the Quran? Is that in Hadith? Is that there in the example of the family of the Prophet. So where
the idea कि पूरी चीजें नापी हुई है ना कि अब ईरान के हैं तो वो बिल्कुल यहाँ तक के बुरके नपे हुए होते हैं और फिर वो that it's codified as if they're trying to codify a higher spiritual concept which is about
and then we have this thing in mind that Bibi Fatma would be wearing this black abaya like this and like this and like this, but that's not what she wore. If you look
Right.
at her clothes from the Topkapi Museum, they're like these kurtas, like
Right.
woolen kurtas and a scarf, you know what I mean? So it's not, वो ये हुआ था कि ईरान में they started doing reenactments of the story of Karbala and the story of the Prophet and stuff like that, because उनके यहाँ एक historic storytelling का tradition बहुत strong है. तो उसमें क्योंकि females नहीं मिलती थी तो वो आदमी जो थे वो roles play करते थे, and to camouflage the fact that it's a man, they had to put them in these covered up whatever. So that then became associated with कि अच्छा ये जो थे बीबी फातिमा और ये इस तरह के कपड़े पहनते थे. हालांकि that has no bearing on what was actually there. That was just a pantomime that came to represent,
At this point in life, space and time की इतनी बात हो रही है, how the consciousness travels, and so I want you to humor me. What advice would you give to your younger self, and what advice would your younger self give to your older self?
बहुत ही तुम पहले questions लेके आते हो. Okay, so I think I would just tell my younger self to be patient and allow myself to give it time and let things unfold and not kind of be rushing for answers and taking actions. एक बहुत ज़्यादा आप एक panic mode में होते हो when you're younger. You just need to so I would say थोड़ा relax, chill. There's no hurry. And what would my younger self say to me?
The rebel in Ziya's time. सारे फौजी और मुल्ला सब पड़ जाती होगी सब अतिया खान को देख के तो. What do you do now?
The Musharraf time.
That too. A second. That was an interesting phase in your journey, right? I mean, but again, you had exactly opposite reasons and opposite motivations in both those times. In Zia's time and in Musharraf's time, you played completely different roles of political activism and social activism in your position, considering that both were dictatorships, but one had a certain effect on Pakistan or dusra had a completely different effect. I've lived through that era in Karachi. I know how peaceful it was and how beloved Musharraf was, but it was a dictatorship nonetheless. How do you see things now?
How does anyone see things now?
It depends करता है. आप traveling बहुत करती हैं. कौन से मुल्क का asylum apply करना चाहिए? You think?
वो भी फायदा नहीं है. सारी दुनिया में कदर मचा हुआ है.
गए सारे. I wish I could go to Africa. But seriously, I mean, what do you think? I mean, is it necessarily 70% of this country is under 30 or 65%? They're all kids who know what the reality out there it is. How do they get ahead? How do they stay motivated?
बहुत मुश्किल है.
Motivate होना.
बहुत मुश्किल है. We had it easy. You guys have.
Seriously, ये आप कह रही हैं? हम तो ज़िया के time में यानी ये तो.
No, I mean, it's not just that. It's the political situation, it's the economic situation, it's the corruption, it's the injustice, it's the police thing not working, it's the global, it's climate
disasters.
change. Yeah, the world is coming to an end, and it's pretty miserable. I mean, it is,
so
right?
We're screwed is what we're saying.
Well, no, what we're saying is that our attention and focus has power. Our energy is fuel, okay? And we are being directed very strategically to suck our energy and keep us constantly in this state of anxiety and fear.
Turmoil.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the game, right? कि वो ultimately आपको इतना मजबूर कर दें कि वो को जो भी उनका एजेंडा है, it's one world currency, it's no ownership of land, या जो भी उनका, because देखो what's been happening is that wealth is slowly and surely being more and more kind of concentrated to a
Towards a
smaller and
percent,
smaller
sure.
percentage
Right.
of people, and the rest of the world is going to hell. Even during the pandemic, there were certain key 3-4 individuals who,
Made billions, probably, sure.
and most of
Trillions.
the middle class people lost their businesses, lost their homes. उनको तो तबाही हो गई ना.
Right.
This is like a global phenomenon right now.
तो यहीं बैठे रहे, ठीक है, अगर चिल है, घर है तो थोड़ा स्ट्रगल कर लें,
नहीं,
खैर है,
so the
बाहर
thing
से
is, now
पैसे मंगवा
either
लें.
we can just let all our energy be sucked into that thing and become pawns in that worldview, or we can take ownership of our attention and our energy and our thoughts and direct them in a more positive way to heal ourselves, to understand that ultimately we have power. Ultimately, the dark forces need your consent. If you refuse to consent, they have no power over you. So वो एक concept है ना कुरान में कि the chosen few or the select few, that basically वो शैतान भी कह देता है कि अच्छा ये तो मेरे मैं तो ये तो मेरे नहीं है, ये आपके हैं,
हाँ,
मैं
इनसे तो मैं
मेरा
नहीं जीत
कोई,
सकता.
हाँ. So aim towards that kind of akida and faith, and you kind of rise above all of this, because जितना वो लोग उस टाइप के concentration बढ़ेगी, वो energy powerful होगी, तो वो automatically फिर ये जो दूसरी energy है इसको counter कर सकती है. It has to be a very organic thing, people first of all getting free from the mental prisons that their society and their religion and their culture and वो fear based है कि आपको स्कूल में भी डंडे पड़ते हैं, आपको घर पे भी डंडे पड़ते हैं, आपकी गवर्नमेंट भी आपको डंडे मार रही होती है, तो either you don't question and you follow, और हम तुम्हें भंगी बना देंगे, तुम्हें सिस्टम से निकाल देंगे, लूजर के लोग तुम्हें हंसेंगे तुम पे, और so you are forced to just survive. And in surviving, you have to give your consent to things that you find outrageous, right?
ठीक है, यहाँ से एक लेते हैं थोड़ा सा एक sort of a rapid fire sort of thing. I'm going to give you these one-liners जो कि मैंने आपको फॉलो करते हुए और अपने भी एक्सपीरियंसेस में क्रॉसओवर पॉइंट्स ढूंढे. पहला वाला और ये मैंने आपकी जो प्रेस पे देख रहा था, द सेल्फी विद जुनैद जमशेद इज हराम. क्या सीन था?
I mean, then all these selfies of Maulana Fazlur Rahman and all these Maulvis, तो वो भी फिर हराम है, तो उनको भी कहो कि भी ना लें सेल्फियाँ.
Yeah, bless his soul. Junaid Jamshed is such a brilliant guy.
This was at a wedding. There were like a lot of friends, and we kind of, and he's someone that I've known since much before he got into the Dari and the Tablighi Jamaat and all of that stuff. And then at that time, he had come to a point where he was kind of fed up of them, because उन्होंने उसको attack भी किया था. वो जो पूरा बीबी आयशा के बारे में उसने कुछ कह दिया, तो उसके पीछे पड़ गए थे, उसको एयरपोर्ट पे अटैक किया था. So he'd come to a point where he'd seen through the dark side of that system as well, but he was kind of stuck,
But he was a kind soul.
So,
he was a
but
gentleman.
He was kind of getting more relaxed and more going back
approachable
to his,
and accessible.
to his roots, because वो तो pop idol था ना. मतलब वो तो कहीं और ही बिल्कुल यूनिवर्स से होता हुआ वो इस डायरेक्शन में चला गया था.
दूसरा टेक, हॉट क्रॉस टेक. Transgenders are conspirators against Islam.
देखो दो चीज़ें हैं. एक तो है जो बायोलॉजिकली उनके ऑर्गन्स जो हैं वो अल्लाह की तरफ से वो दोनों ऑर्गन्स उनके पास होते हैं. Right. So that's a biological thing.
ठीक है.
That you can't argue with.
Right.
ठीक है. And they have rights and they have हमारे पुराने ज़माने में जो आई थिंक इवन नाउ जो काबा की चाबियाँ थीं, they were these tribe of African eunuchs जिनके
Who
पास
used to
थी,
handle them,
you know,
like in their hands, like properly handle them.
they were the
Yeah,
keepers
yeah.
of the keys of the Kaaba, right? Because they were representing this woman who I don't know, कोई पूरी कहानी है.
Right.
And so I think
They've always had
also
acceptance in even societies, like
in
throughout.
Islamic societies,
Particularly
there's always
Islamic
been
societies,
room
ठीक है.
for the
They
third
respect
gender
and
or
right.
the thing, you know,
ठीक है.
वो मे बी हमने उनको मेन स्ट्रीम नहीं किया, उनको अलग थोड़ा रखा है, बट वो हमें एक है अंडरस्टैंडिंग. अब ये जो वेस्टर्न एक एजेंडा आया है कि भी आप 6 साल के बच्चों से पूछ रहे हैं कि आप लड़का हैं कि आप लड़की हैं, और रोज पूछ रहे हैं, और फिर आप बिफोर द एज ऑफ 10-12 साल आप उनका सेक्स चेंज कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि एक दफ़ा सुबह उठ के बच्चा कह रहे हैं कि नहीं मैं लड़की नहीं हूँ, मैं लड़का बनना चाह रहा हूँ. आई मीन इट इज़ some kind of weird agenda which is not okay.
It's
Yeah.
bonkers,
Yeah.
as David would say.
They would say, yeah.
नमाज पढ़ लो, डिप्रेशन खत्म हो जाएगा.
Well, there's truth to that, but the thing is कि अगर आप नमाज किसी और नियत की वजह से पढ़ रहे हैं, तो आपको वो वाला फ़ायदा नहीं मिलेगा. Because namaz is basically your rabta with God, your connection with God. That time where you put aside all the world and everything else and you really direct yourself to God and you know that He is witnessing you. तो वो जो एक कैफियत है या वो जो उस कनेक्शन से जो आपको एक एनर्जी मिलती है, वो सर्टनली उसमें बहुत ज़्यादा आपके स्पिरिचुअल बेनिफिट्स हैं, आपके हर किस्म के बेनिफिट्स हैं, बिकॉज आप एक एनर्जी के अंदर टैप कर रहे हैं. लेकिन अगर आप सर पीट रहे हैं अपना फर्श पे और जल्दी जल्दी कुछ बोल रहे हैं और कोई कनेक्शन तो नहीं है, उसमें भी फ़ायदा है, क्योंकि आप कम अज़ कम अल्लाह का हुक्म तो अदा कर रहे हैं. बट द थिंग इज़, लेट्स नॉट फॉरगेट दैट नमाज इज़ नॉट an end in itself. It's a means to an end. It's a ritual that is meant to take you to a reality.
Right.
And the reality is to be in a constant state of connection with the divine. How can you even be out of connection for 1 minute? Because God is there all the time. There is no escaping God.
ठीक है.
ये तो वो awareness नहीं है आपको हर सेकंड में. तो फिर वो जो हदीस है कि जी पहले तो पता नहीं कितनी नमाजें कहाँ गई थी, फिर मूसा अलैहिस्सलाम बार-बार वो
5 पे आ गई.
हाँ, तो 5 पे. So the idea is that namaz is a state that
of being.
And the ritual prayers and meditation and all the other spiritual practices are training you to come to that state of being. Right? It's not an end in itself.
Got it. COVID was a conspiracy.
Certainly. I mean,
पंगा है थोड़ा, लेते कोई मसला नहीं. अब तो 2 साल हो गए हैं नीचे सारा करता है. अब तो हर कोई कुछ भी कह सकता है. अब तो मसला ही नहीं.
अब तो सब कह रहे हैं ना.
छींक मार रहा बंदा कहता है कोविड हो गया, इजी है, चलो जाओ पैनाडोल खा लो. तो उसामा बिन लादेन वाज अ हीरो. और a novel hero लिखा हुआ था किसी ने कहीं बैठ के CIA में कहीं कहानी लिखता है. I
think that there was a time where he was.
ठीक है.
Because he was a lone voice who was challenging America and saying all these big things.
Right.
Right. तो एक उसकी अपील थी, because उसने जो अपना जियोपॉलिटिकल नैरेटिव जो क्रिएट किया था जस्टिफाई करने के लिए, वो बड़ा प्लॉजिबल था और वो बड़ा उसमें अट्रैक्शन थी.
Yvonne Ridley wrote कि used to call him the Che Guevara of the East, but khair, go on.
But when they took ownership of 9/11, is when you could no longer justify their stance, because nowhere in Quran does it allow you to take innocent lives. I mean, there are codes of ethics of war.
बिल्कुल ठीक है.
If you defy all those codes of ethics, then you are automatically operating outside of the Islamic framework. तो फिर आप टेररिस्ट बन गए हैं, आप मतलब you cannot justify that anymore.
सुनते कानों, देखती आंखों को सलाम. आप एक करारदाद करें कि 8, 9 और 10 मार्च को आपने एक्ट 3 पहुंचना है गैर हतमी करारदाद पर, जहां होगी उल जलूल कॉमेडी और रूप परवर मौसीकी। हतमी बात यह है कि आपको मजा आएगा, गैर हतमी बात यह कि शायद समझ कुछ भी ना आए। पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद।
वेलकम बैक टू जुमा जुमा 8 दिन। और अब हम ज़रा जाते हैं इख्तिताम की तरफ। एक पहले तो एक कस्टमरी पाकिस्तानी रिचुअल हम करते हैं ना आजकल, सोशल रिचुअल। आप 9 मई की मजम्मत कर दें, ऑन द रिकॉर्ड बस कर दें, बगैर सोचे बस 9 मई को जो हुआ सब उसको बात मैं कह रहा हूँ।
Yeah, I just feel कि जो रिएक्शन है वो भी बहुत ridiculous है, so I mean whatever. But आप जैसे आदमी कमेडियन हैं, naughty से हैं, and all of that. How did you get connected with this
The calendar code
calendars and spirituality, and how has it affected you, or what did you experience?
I experienced a sort of an inner and outer renaissance in my life. It made me feel like I belong. I belong to the craft I'm doing it. I belong to the community I'm in. I belong to the place I'm in. I belong to the ritual I'm in right now. That's what it gave me. Again, मुझे यूथ क्लब वाले जो हैं बहुत अच्छे लगते हैं, तो मैं इसलिए I won't go as to recap what I learned from the calendar code, but what I did learn was that half the change in our spirit as men should be to give the feminine spirit as much respect and venerance as possible if we want to be the best version of ourselves.
Okay, so like I said earlier, there are two aspects to the feminine. There's the divine feminine, women who are channeling that kind of energy, and then there's a toxic feminine. Masla ye hota hai ki most men are under the control or out of fear or whatever, under the control of the toxic women. जो divine feminine किस्म की औरतें होते हैं उनको इतना appreciate नहीं किया जाता, because they are not demanding, they don't want, you know, they're not manipulative, they don't want to control you and all of that.
वो जो toxic वाली है,
तो वो ये नहीं कि it's not a generalized thing कि आप सब औरतों को respect दें. If there's a toxic negative woman, तो उसको आपने ज़रूरी नहीं है कि आप उसके थले लगें
पंजाब की
because she is a woman. Well, I mean, you know, but ये है कि चाहे कोई भी इंसान हो, चाहे मर्द हो, औरत हो, जहाँ भी आपको spirituality नज़र आए, जहाँ भी आपको divinity नज़र आए, उसको आप respect दें.
खैर, और to the second part, the comedian or the expressionist side of me and how it connects with all of this, shout out Zain Zuhaib. इनका जब हैदरियम रिलीज हुआ तो I was vibing to that song so much. और उन्हीं दिनों out of nowhere Atiya Khan reached into the abyss that is Bahriya town Lahore और कहा कि तुम उड़ के आ जाओ लाल शहबाज कलंदर के पास. I'll see to it that you get connected. And since I came back, I have been expressing myself ever since. That's my connection with the code. And all of it, comedy, film, whatever. Even this, everything has a tiny veneer of meaning to it because that's the Kalandari spirit in me. ठीक है, अपने तरीके से, अपनी look से और किसी भी चीज़ से try to get the message going. Peace. Yeah. एके हमने इस शो में कितनी ऐसी को बातें की हैं जिन पे हमें कैंसिल होने का चांस है. मेरा चन्ना मुन्ना सा शो अभी शुरू हुआ है. अरे और आएंगे. Any parting words for me and JJ8D and our tiny audience जो कि ज़्यादातर by the way बाहर बैठी, मुझे पता लगा 40% इंडिया में लोग देख मुझे. जय हिंद.
No, I mean, I guess
चिल है, सब सही चल रहा है.
Yeah, I guess you know, a lot of things that we're talking about perhaps may not resonate or may not you know, be easily understandable. लेकिन ये होता है कि आपको ज़रूरी नहीं है कि आप हर चीज़ समझें या कनेक्ट करें, लेकिन चीज़ें होती हैं, they're like little seeds and then they have their own kind of perfect these concepts, you know. They take time to sort of to start to make sense if someone is interested.
Goose Raba. Alright guys, this was Jummah Art Din. And I was with Atiya Khan, my teacher, my guide, my flame. And
Flame का क्या मतलब?
आपने तो आग लगाई है हमारे अंदर के निकलो बाहर, बातें करो कर छोड़ो अब, स्टॉप सिटिंग
मैं
अराउंड।
ये नहीं कहा कि बातें करो।
बातें नहीं करने को कहा था लेकिन फिल्में बनाने को कहा था, ठीक है। तो अब हम जल्द मिलेंगे जब एडिट टेबल पे ये गुजरेगी। जुम्मा आठ दिन आउट।